I think that if you look at this, one of the things I'm interested in is as a potential imbalance between the two parties. And my background is all US, so I'm going to be drawing almost exclusively upon American examples here. If you look at the figures on the board, for example, there, I think you see a real imbalance in the adoption of the internet in terms of fundraising. Don't forget, historically, the US has a very poor turnout, anywhere between 55 and 60%. If you get 60%, that's really quite remarkable. Of those, 13% of all adults contribute to a presidential election in 2012, and of those, 67% donated in person or by electronic means, 50% by mail, and 10% ended up using a text message. But whilst that sounds interestingly enough, if you start looking at the differences between Republicans and Democrats, you see some interesting figures, I believe. Of those campaign contributions which take place in person, by phone or mail, some 87% of Republican donors are happy to do that compared to 57% of Democrats. But look how the figures change when it comes to new media, online for example. 57% of Democrats, only 34% of Republicans. And whilst the numbers are certainly less overall, there's certainly a complete distinction between 15% of Democrats who are happy to contribute using text or cell phones, and only 6% of Republicans. Let's see how this has evolved in terms of financial figures involved. Look at the 2000 figures for John McCain. A lot was made about the fact that in the 24 hours after he won the New Hampshire primary, for example, he was able to raise $500,000 on the web in a single day. You bring that forward just 7 years and look at the sort of money that Ron Paul is generating over 2 separate days in the fall of 2007, 4.3 million and 6 million in 24 hours, largely through online donations. You can see how it is that you've seen an evolution in the sort of funds which are able to be generated by the internet. It's clear, I think, that, and this is something that I was talking to Matt about, and I think was reflected in some of the things he was saying this morning, that the internet really is a tool, but you've still got to have the nous to know how to use it. And it's just like politics generally, it's no place for the faint-hearted. The internet will not save a poor candidate, and that's poor in all terms of the word, effectively. And how it is that they use their internets has to be very, very smartly put together. You cannot just, and I appreciate I'm paraphrasing Matt, but I wrote this PowerPoint before he spoke, I assure you. You can't just take a website and bolt it onto a poor campaign and hope to win effectively. So we need to be very, very careful of that. One thing that I'm very interested in is reach and effectiveness and how that's used or abused, for example, because I think that one of the ways in which the internet can be misconstrued is by those of us who take great pleasure in the use of our iPods, our iPads, and our smart technology, and assume that everybody has access. Well, of course, that isn't the case. Some interesting figures coming out of the Pew Center in 2012, the figures of which are on the board there. Some 65% of Americans have broadband connection, but look how those figures break down. We shouldn't assume, of course, that everyone, therefore, has access to the internet. So one has to question who is being reached by this technology. Is it everyone? Are politicians preaching to the converted? Are they only reaching a great many of their own supporters? If 18% of Americans don't have the internet, and those who don't have the internet claim, as you can see there at the bottom, or maybe not, I'll read it to you, those who don't have access to the internet claim that they don't believe the internet is relevant to them. So it's interesting to see how that's going to change and pare out and be used or abused by future politicians. Again, in terms of use of political videos, some 55% of registered voters claimed that they'd seen videos over the last campaign season, with some 48% of them choosing to look at news reports. I think what's fascinating about this in terms of use and abuse is how the internet relates with mainstream old-style media. Some of you might be aware that Lyndon Johnson in 1964 put a very famous advert together which was called the Daisy advert, and it showed the countdown of a nuclear technology with a young girl picking a daisy. And that only ever ran once on television, but everybody thinks they saw it over and over again because the mainstream media picked it up and ran with it. And I think that is very much one way in which the internet and the mainstream media can work together to be used and abused. I think a classic example with regard to that would be George Allen's famous mistake, for example, when it was posted upon YouTube, when he made what was seen to be a racially derogatory term to a supporter at a point when George Allen was seen to be a very strong candidate. That video went viral. It was picked upon by the mainstream media, replayed over and over and over again, and you see how it is that a potential smart use of the media could come about in the future. Not necessarily by staying on the internet, but by getting something that's particularly contentious, getting it on the internet, and then getting the mainstream media to pick it up and run with it.
2 minutes.
I'm absolutely spot on time. What I was about to say, therefore, in summation, and I've obviously run through this as quick as I can to make sure that I'm sticking to time, is that what I think we've witnessed is a revolution in the use of technology that has evolved very, very carefully, with one campaign learning very assiduously from the mistakes and the benefits that are made by the team that have gone before it, but that the internet, like the television beforehand, is only ever a tool, a platform, and one which smart campaign teams and smart politicians will use to their advantage, but which won't be able to save poor politicians from themselves or from people who are poorly advising them. And that, like television, is a platform which works best when it's used in short, sharp, focused bursts. Thank you very much.
One of the reasons, or one of the seductions of using the term democratic political campaign, is that we see the internet as inherently virtuous. Perhaps we don't want to think about the true nature of democracy in the information age. And we prefer to understand democracy, or e-democracy in the information age, as an extension of old and, in brackets, good electoral politics. Some of the academic writers who've written on this subject talk in sort of the terms that we've heard expressed today, where the internet and e-democracy are seen as quote-unquote an adjunct to the republic, and in a sense supportive of old politics. There are analyses which talk about how the democratic, brackets good, sectors of society use the internet. There is some discussion of e-democracy, and in a sense how the explosion of these information technologies allows more voter input on the issues, or more citizen input on the issues. But at the end of the day, I see a very strong contradiction between voter-led sentiment and party-led sentiment. And that brings us to the question of direct democracy through means of advanced technology. Why can't all of the citizens who are registered to vote on every piece of legislation? Which is a proposition put forward for decades now about one of the possible benefits of the advent of these technologies. Of course, e-democracy offers the opportunity for democratic supervision of elected members of parliament or legislatures, whereby the public get to scrutinise, comment on, or otherwise reflect on what's happening. My departure point for this is, having read some ethicists on the question of what is the information society and where are we headed. My favourite is this guy, Luciano Floridi from Oxford, and in a co-authored piece in 2002, they reached the conclusion that the information society raises issues which are not uncontroversially unique, which is more or less the formula we've heard this morning, that there's some unknown relationship between politics and the new information technologies. But they also reach a conclusion that they're sufficiently novel to render inadequate the adoption of standard macroethics. And I think really what I'm asking for is a suspension of judgment about whether politics are an adjunct of the republic or in fact a transformative tool. While everything we've heard about the virtues, benefits, uses and misuses of modern technologies in support of electoral politics, but there's a bigger world out there where the reaggregation is occurring, which might have nothing to do immediately with electoral politics, but may work itself out in all sorts of other ways.
You know, I think the first point that I tried to make today was actually that the internet revolution, social media, is actually disruptive to the political process. That it's much harder for traditional political parties or those who govern to monopolize and dominate these media or use them in a particular way than it is for insurgent movements. Be those insurgent movements within a particular political party, so for example Barack Obama challenging someone who was seen as invincible, Hillary Clinton, in the primaries in 2007 and 2008. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that what you see as a reaction from those who are threatened by this is the misuse of the internet. What I mean by that, and I said this before, is that, you know, if you want to look at how to use this successfully, you start with culture and you start with strategy. Too many people around the world think that it's just enough to have a Twitter account, social media or otherwise, a Facebook account, and you have that as a kind of facade at the front of your movement that sort of shows that you're fresh and new. Look, I must be fresh and new because every time I do something I tweet about it. Or look how many Facebook followers I have. They may have absolutely no idea what they want those followers to do, if those followers will actually do anything that they ask them to do, but they just have this out there. And there's a danger to that, which is that if you are a sort of open movement that wants to include people, that wants to empower people, that has a very specific goal for how you engage people through Twitter, through email, through the Facebook, through other social media, that's an essential part of your strategy. Your entire campaign, organization, and operation is designed to use and facilitate that. If, however, and it's important that it's done that way because you're usually trying to attract people who find that appealing, who want to get engaged, who have found that. I mean, we have this. I remember having a discussion with people in Canada, and an individual running Justin Trudeau's campaign for the leadership of the Liberal Party sort of made an argument. Well, the Liberal Party's never been hard to join. It's just that people don't know how to join. But we've always been welcoming, and it reminded me of the story about the Reform Club, which is if you don't know where the door is, you're not welcome. And so what online media, social media provides are multiple points of entry into a political campaign. If you're providing those multiple points of entry, then you need something for those people to do through those points of entry. And that's the problem that many traditional political parties face, is they put this facade up there, people come, and then there's nothing for them to do. So if you're already of this viewpoint that you've lost your deference, you've lost your respect, once you encounter that, you become more alienated. It's harder still then to attract these people. So the point is that if you want to use this media as a traditional political party, get your culture right, get your strategy right, and then build a structure around that. Get those things in place, and that's what people don't do. The second thing is, and I said this, and I'm just repeating my conclusions from the last statement, is that whatever exists online has to exist offline. There are very, very few things that you can do online alone. You can give money. And, on the issue of uses or misuses, the Obama campaign, for example, was exceptionally good at producing text messages or emails that were sent at about 10:30, 11:30 at night when people might be in bars that would rile up the 20-somethings to the 30-somethings. It was their most successful way of raising money online. Matthew McGregor who will tell you this, but it was timed because they knew people were out drinking. They knew that they would be with people who probably shared similar views, felt similarly about a particular issue, and they sent something to fire them up. And these people were drinking, and they donated $25. And they did this in a way in which all your details were saved, so all you had to do was say, click 25. Whatever number you pressed was what you got, or a series of options. So is that a use or a misuse? If you're in the campaign and you're trying to raise money, it's a very clever use. You know your target audience, you know how to reach them, you know when to reach them, and you know what to say to them to get your result. But if you're looking at it from a broader perspective about, are you taking advantage of people at a vulnerable moment? Possibly. So, but that's one of the few activities. But beyond that, whatever you do, what you're organising offline to achieve an online, you're organising online to achieve an offline activity. Be that voting, be that canvassing, be it vote, whatever it is. But be clear about that and make sure that however you're organising offline is done in a way that it complements the online and vice versa. I think the third problem that we face is that we are traditionally, political parties in Europe, membership-based organisations. And the people who are members, sometimes old, sometimes not the most dynamic, sometimes not always online, feel that they are the guardians of the historical and institutional memory of that organisation. They also pay for it. They pay a membership fee. And all of a sudden they're being confronted by a system which supposedly in some ways empowers others at their expense. So whichever way you use new media to attract supporters into your organisation, what you also need to do is to find a way in which that you take people with you. This is about a culture of change management. Make people who have been in the party for a longer period of time feel comfortable with this. Make them part of the process. Because if not, if you attract more supporters but you lose your members who finance the organisation, then that's not a win-win.